What's going on, guys? Welcome back. We're going to be talking about NVIDIA's earnings and basically how we crush it. I'm going to be walking you through the trade made on NVIDIA for the earnings today, and then the mindset I had going into the trade and why I was confident in taking the trade. And you'll see that I didn't do heavy share size, so I was going into it knowing that NVIDIA earnings would be volatile, and I did run the risk of losing, so I didn't go heavy shares. I only took 40 shares on the trade, so we're going to walk you through it step by step here. So for one, let's just kind of walk you through the trade. So let me shrink this down a little bit. So ended up buying, let me do that a little different. Here we go. So I ended up buying NVIDIA down here. I ended up buying 40 shares. So I ended up buying 20 shares here at a dollar or 154. Then I bought another 20 shares at 154.48. So we ended up having 40 shares, right around a price of probably 154.20. Okay. So we had 40 shares, and of course earnings come out and NVIDIA just skyrockets, and I end up selling the last little bit here. I had 22 and 18 shares there at 167.78 and 167.87. So as you can see, it wasn't a really big trade, only 40 shares, but as you can see, 40 shares ended up getting me $533 profit. So really good trade nonetheless. And that's why when it comes to earnings, when you know stocks are going to tend to be very volatile in their earnings, you don't necessarily want to just kind of slam in a bunch of shares, because imagine if we did 1,000 shares, right? I did 1,000 shares on this trade and it went against the opposite way. Could have been a massive loss. Now, of course, I would have been able to exit before getting, the full loss of this whole move, but nonetheless, that's why going into earnings, if you're going to do it, always safer to go with a smaller share count so that you're not taking on too much risk during the trade. All right, so that was a trade. Now, a lot of people are going to say earnings are gambles, and to a certain extent, yeah, earnings can be basically like a gamble. So would you want to put a lot of shares on what could potentially be a gamble? No, you don't. So that's why we only went 40 shares. Now, a lot of times you're going to hear me preach, don't trade earnings, and that's because they can be extremely volatile and extremely risky. So nonetheless, we did trade it, made some good money. Now, why did I take the trade on NVIDIA? Why did I feel confident even, being long on their earnings? Well, if you look at NVIDIA, right, past year or so, or however many months, it's been downtrending from 300 all the way down to 126. So this is a really big down drop. So already for one, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, NVIDIA's already dropped quite a bit. Is it really going to move much lower on at least these earnings, okay? I'm like, well, it could, sure. And then, we come down here and we look at the volume. Look at all the volume over the past, couple weeks. Tons of buying volume, big buying volume there on that gap down, that day that it gapped down, right? Let's zoom into that one. This was just recently, this gap down here. And some of you guys will know exactly what I'm talking about if you're up to date in the market. But you see this big gap down? Think about that day, the day it gapped down big. Look at that buying volume. So, you look at here and you see all this volume. This is a daily chart. Secondly, I look at the weekly chart. And when you come over the past couple weeks, these are all weekly candles. You go green. So over the past 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks, it's all been green in terms of the weekly candles. So going into earnings, I'm thinking to myself, the thing's been beaten down since 300. We've had massive amounts of buying volume over the past couple weeks. What's the likelihood that it's going to go down? Everybody on Wall Street and all the analysts are telling us that NVIDIA has been downgraded, and everybody's downgrading NVIDIA. And everyone's projecting they're going to have bad earnings. So in my mind, I go, okay, everybody's thinking NVIDIA is going to have a bad earnings because they've been tanking so much already. And, there's a couple other things. But nonetheless, the full story is most everybody, retail and, analysts were saying short NVIDIA or NVIDIA is bearish and NVIDIA is not going to make earnings and etc. Everyone downgrades it. So I did what I thought I should do. Go opposite of most, right? If most people are thinking it's going to go down, it's probably going to go up. Hence that 90% of traders lose money in the market. So I'm going to do what the 10% are doing. Most are thinking short. I'll probably go long. So all my thesis was built on going long NVIDIA was just, what is everybody else doing? Let's do the opposite. And so myself included with a few of us in our chat room, we decided go long NVIDIA with a respectable amount of shares and let's play it out. Sure enough, it crushes it. Okay. And that's what we've basically been doing for the last 4 earnings on Netflix, I think, went with Shopify. But regardless, we've done it for the past couple earnings. We just ideally just analyze what most people are thinking of doing, and we go the opposite. So far, been pretty successful. What do you want to call it, a strategy or not? It's not really a strategy, but it's just built on thesis, data, and information, and just playing the odds, really. So again, just want to walk you through that trading, kind of give you the mindset of how I go about looking at earnings every once in a while. As I kind of go, get a feel for what is everybody thinking, what's everyone doing, and then I form a thesis around that, and then I usually play the opposite. Now, some of you guys are going to say, that's not much of a strategy, and sure, it's not, but 40 shares, why not? So I figured I'd come and kind of put that into perspective. So if any of you guys ever want to go ahead and play earnings, try and block out the noise of what everybody else is thinking or saying and create your own thesis. And that's how you, in turn, are probably going to be more successful when you're going based off of what you feel is supposed to happen versus what everyone else is telling you is probably going to happen. All right. It's same situation with AMD, right? With AMD's earnings that weren't too long ago. Right before their earnings, I think the stock was going down a little bit, and there was a bunch of press releases and news releases saying, people are bracing for a bad AMD earnings because of how, NVDA had lowered their guidance before earnings. So everyone's like, if NVIDIA is going to have a bad earnings, AMD must have a bad earnings. So in the press and in the news, you're starting to hear, everybody's bracing for a bad earnings on AMD because NVIDIA is going to have bad earnings, and back and forth. The next thing you know, AMD skyrockets up. So again, try and build your own thesis and try and block out some of the noise that you're hearing within the market. And a lot of times it can give you better insight or help you, gather and build a better thesis when you're trading. So hope you guys like the video. Really good trade. We'll be doing a little recap video here on my trades for the day here in just a second. But anyways, hope you guys like the video. Stay tuned for the next one, and I'll see you guys on the next video.